Something was stalking the forests and pastures of southern France. Something monstrous, literally. Between 1764 and 1767, around 100 people in the Gevaudan region of southern France met violent deaths. Around 50 or so people were able to survive the terrifying and brutal attacks. According to the locals, the culprit behind these killings was a creature known simply as the Beast of Geuvodon. What was this beast? Through the centuries, lots of different candidates have been proposed. Some say it was just some extraordinary wolf or pack of wolves. Others have suggested a wolf-dog hybrid, or that maybe it was an escaped lion or hyena. Most boringly, some have said that there was no beast, and the whole thing was simply a case of mass hysteria. Some have even suggested that it was a human serial killer, or some prehistoric beast that somehow survived to early modern times. Now, earlier on, I mentioned that the beast killed around 100 people and injured around 50. But we need to take those numbers with a grain of salt. Record keeping was far from standardized during that period, and we can't be precisely sure which deaths are attributable to the beast. It's quite possible that some people were killed by the beast, and their deaths were never reported. It's also possible that some people were assumed to be killed by the beast who actually met their deaths in other ways. In short, this number could easily be significantly higher or lower, but the general consensus of the sources I've read put it around that range. There's another point that I want to start off by emphasizing, because so much of this story sounds like something from Grimm's fairy tales. But this stuff really happened. Dozens of real people met horrible and violent deaths, and we're not sure why. There was real human suffering here, and we do want to be respectful of that. But there's also the fact that 2.5 centuries later, we are still baffled by what exactly caused all that human suffering. All right, here are the basics. One of the complicating factors here is the Gevaudan region of France. It's still pretty remote and rural to this day. But back in the late 18th century, it was considered an obscure backwater, a wilderness that had not been fully tamed. And make no mistake, Gevaudan is beautiful. Green pastures, rich volcanic soil, dark forests, and jagged cliffs. Again, it looks like something out of Grimm's fairy tales. The sort of place when, shrouded in a little mist, you can easily imagine a monster. Now, as you can imagine, with so many attacks, about 100 killed, about 50 survivors, there were reams of reports from the survivors of these attacks. It's kind of hard to know what to do with these reports. It's easy to imagine that some of them may have been embellished or exaggerated in the retelling, and some of the memories might have been colored by the understandable terror that the victims were in. So it should come as no surprise that these reports don't always agree with each other. As researcher Brian Dunning explained, quote, "There is little consistency to the reports. The beast was said to be red and covered with scales, or it had long fur and a mane and black stripes. It had a long thin head like a greyhound, or it had an enormous head with a huge mouth. It had great talons instead of a wolf's claws. It could run at supernatural speed. Sometimes it hunted alone, sometimes with a mate, sometimes with its young." End quote. And as it so often does, the Wikipedia entry for the Beast of Geuvodon gives a pretty good summation of these varying accounts. It says that the beast was, quote, "a tawny russet color with dark streaks or stripes and a dark stripe down its back, a tail longer than a wolf's, ending in a tuft, according to some contemporary eyewitnesses. It was said to attack with formidable teeth and claws and appeared to be the size of a calf or cow and seemed to fly or bound across the fields toward its victims." End quote. And again, with all these different accounts factored in, there are a few other themes as well. First, and most troubling, was the beast's choice of prey. It never attacked the herds of cattle or sheep. It only attacked the humans. Some of the bodies were found only in bits and pieces, and obviously had been eaten. Other bodies were found only with injuries to the neck and seemed to have been killed basically for sport. Really, reading these reports is really gruesome. Now, the obvious candidate for the beast would be a wolf. Wolves did live in Gevaudan at this time, as they lived throughout much of Europe. Wolf attacks on livestock were nothing new and would have been something the locals were familiar with. Wolf attacks on humans probably would have happened as well, though these would have been much more rare. It's now well established that wolves, in general, don't view humans as a prey source, and absent extraordinary circumstances, they typically leave humans alone. But these extraordinary circumstances do sometimes occur, so the locals would have been familiar with wolf attacks. And there's one thing where these witnesses seem to agree almost across the board: the beast was not a wolf. Yes, it had many wolf like characteristics, but the locals, who again would be very familiar with the wildlife in their region, said there were key differences between the beast and the wolves. Now, eventually, news of these killings in Gevaudan began to spread as the killings themselves piled up. Newspaper headlines reported these gruesome deaths in breathless detail. These tales eventually spread all the way to King Louis XV at his palace in Versailles. The king sent his own royal hunters to kill the beast. Soon, Gevaudan was crawling with monster hunters. During one hunt, an estimated 30,000 men were participating. Their tactics included traps of all kinds, everything from using poisoned meat as bait to dressing soldiers up as women to trick the beast into attacking. Nothing worked. The beast seemed impervious to harm, either from spears or from guns. There were several reports of the beast seeming to be mortally wounded, only to later get up off the ground and escape. Some of the attacks happened in quick succession over an impossibly large distance, leading some to suggest that there was more than one beast. Some even attributed supernatural powers to the beast and suggested it could walk on two legs, kind of like a werewolf. And the beast was also clever, apparently able to see through even the most wily of traps that the hunters set. Now, eventually, in September 1765, the lieutenant of the King's Hunt, Francois Antoine, got something. It was a wolf, an abnormally large one. It weighed about 130 pounds when most wolves were about 80 pounds. In addition, some of the victims made a positive identification and even spotted scars which they said they inflicted on the beast as they were fighting for their lives. Antoine would later kill what he claimed were pups of the beast. These pups were noted for having double dewclaws on above their paws. Note that point for later. The king was thrilled with the result and declared that the beast had been killed and the case was closed. And the killings did stop. For a while. Several months later, the killings started again. The king was pretty much over it by this point, so he didn't send any further aid. That left it for the locals of Gevaudan to kill the beast themselves. And when you consider the fact that, unlike the fancy royals, the locals actually knew the terrain and the wildlife, that may have been a better idea from the start. The man credited with the final kill was a local hunter and poacher named Jean Chastel. For his part, Chastel thought the creature was a werewolf, so he apparently loaded his musket with silver in addition to all the usual fare and began stalking the creature through the woods. He eventually fatally wounded the creature and brought the body back for measurement. Now, there's good news and bad news with what happened to the body. The good news is that it was able to be measured and it was written down in a report called the Marin Report. Unfortunately, that's where the good news stops. The body was flaunted to all the locals who came in to get a piece, literally, of the monster. Some of them took scalpels and started taking pieces of it apart. So by the time the report could be filed, most of the most interesting parts of the creature were gone. Furthermore, many wanted to bring it up to Paris, where the more scientifically trained biologists could try to identify it. But apparently, the beast had already been sitting in a box in the hot French summers and had reached such a state of putrefaction that they just buried it. The remains were therefore lost forever. However, after this, the killings finally stopped. For good. The Marin Report notes that the dimensions of the beast are roughly the size of a wolf. However, it goes on to note, quote, "This animal appears to be a wolf, but an extraordinary one." By its figure and its proportions, it is very different from the wolves that one sees in this country. This is what more than 300 people from all around have certified. Once again, whatever happened in Gevaudan, it was real. Real people died at rates far in excess of what we would expect from normal wolf predation on humans. The question isn't whether the phenomenon happened, it's what caused it. Okay, now it's time for my choice. And that is that the beast was, probably several, wolf-dog hybrids. We know that wolf-dog hybrids happen. Dogs and wolves can interbreed with each other, and they're all around the world today. In certain areas, a huge percentage of the wolf population has some dog ancestry. Some people even have them as pets. Wolf-dog hybrids would have existed back in Gevaudan as well. As a rural community that raised a lot of livestock, there would have been lots of dogs in the area. Herding dogs, hunting dogs, and, most significantly, dogs for protecting livestock. Now, in this region in particular, the dog that would protect livestock was called the Beauceron. Beaucerons can get very big. In the modern day, some can get up to 100 pounds. And that is significant because remember, wolves in the wild usually are around 80 pounds. But if they crossed with one of these Beaucerons, their offspring could potentially be a lot larger. This is especially the case because of a phenomenon in genetics known as hybrid vigor. What that means is that a hybrid could grow to be larger than either one of its parents. So if we take a creature whose parent was 100 pounds and get it even bigger, well, suddenly we have the makings of a monster. Also, wolf-dog hybrids can have very unpredictable temperaments. Some of them can be very docile and sweet and behave pretty much like dogs. Others behave more like wolves. Still others can be even more aggressive than typical wolves. All right, so imagine we have this, say, a population of wolf-dog hybrids. They're much larger than a typical wolf, maybe even larger than a Beauceron. And some of them are going to be more aggressive than wolves. What are they going to prey upon? Especially if they're isolated from other wolves or other dogs. Where, if you can imagine a situation where one of these crossings happens, it's pretty plausible. Well, one of these wolf-dog hybrids, left to its own devices, might start looking for food in the easiest ways it can. And particularly easy prey would be humans. This is also something that is well established in the scientific literature. I mentioned at the beginning of this episode that wolves generally do not view humans as a food source, and that's true. But there are exceptional circumstances when wolves do prey on humans. And that's generally in situations where wolves feel under threat. Maybe their habitat's being taken away, their food sources taken away. They feel desperate for some reason, so they turn to humans as an easier food source. And when they do that, they generally turn to preying on women and children. Again, this is documented. In instances when humans are preyed upon by wolves, overwhelmingly, they're women or children who are on their own. Wolves target the most vulnerable examples possible. And again, that's exactly what happened here with the Beast of Geuvodon. Another thing to keep in mind is the appearance of the Beast of Geuvodon. Again, the witnesses said that it looked like a wolf, but not exactly. That pretty much seems like a description of a lot of wolf-dog hybrids. Some wolf-dog hybrids look pretty much exactly like wolves. Others take more after the dog side. So they could have things like reddish coats or stripes down their back, or have proportions that aren't what we would typically see from a wolf. Again, exactly what was described for the Beast of Geuvodon. Finally, and in my opinion, most significantly, is the dewclaws. At least one of the beasts that was killed and claimed to be one of the beasts of Geuvodon had double dewclaws on its paws. Double dewclaws are exceedingly rare in wild wolves. However, they're quite common in domestic dogs and are seen quite frequently on wolf-dog hybrids. That strongly suggests that at least one of them was a wolf-dog hybrid. So, in short, that is my explanation for the Beast of Geuvodon. For whatever reason, maybe it was one wolf who particularly liked being romantic with the lady dogs. Maybe it was a pack of wolf-dog hybrids or like a litter that got particularly aggressive. Maybe it was some combination of all of these. For whatever reason, there existed in Geuvodon during those years an especially large group of wolfdog hybrids that were especially large and especially aggressive. They got desperate and turned to the food source that they felt was the most easily accessible to them: humans. Oh, and just so y'all know, there is a dimension here that is worth at least mentioning. Remember Jean Chastel, that hunter slash poacher who finally killed the final beast? Well, there is a theory floating around that he had something to do with creating the beast in the first place. Here's how the theory goes. One, we know that John Chastel's family had a red-coated mastiff. So mastiff, a gigantic dog, red coat, something that was seen in some descriptions on the Beast of Geuvodon. Two, Jean seemed to have a very familiar knowledge of where to find the beast and was finally able to take it down. Also, he seemed to really get a lot of reward from killing the beast. He became a local hero. Also, and frankly, here's where the theory breaks apart, the Beast of Geuvodon terrorizing the countryside distracted the locals from Jean Chastel's other occupation, poaching. So the theory goes that Jean Chastel, in order to distract the authorities from his poaching activities, intentionally bred his red-coated mastiff with a wolf, creating a gigantic, terrifying hybrid, which he then trained and sicked on the population, creating the scare of the Beast of Geuvodon. And to make it more impervious to the attacks of others, he went so far as to cover the beast in hardened boar's hide to make sure that it could withstand all attacks. So the obvious flaw with this is the motive. It's a pretty harebrained scheme to distract from poaching to create a mythical beast and kill hundreds of people. This really sounds more like Hound of the Baskervilles than anything real. So again, I do not find that plausible at all, but the wolf hybrid part is. So maybe John Chastel's Mastiff really did cross with the wolf, and that's how one of the hybrids was created. That part's plausible. The harebrained scheme is not, but it's at least worth mentioning. And there you have it. Thank you so much for watching. Like I've mentioned before, we're a new channel, so we really appreciate if you'd like or subscribe.
Also, remember to leave a comment. Let us know your theories on what the beast is. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
And don't forget to boop that like button and subscribe.